So I came across a story that genuinely unsettled me in a way that most devious ones actually don't. Because this isn't a stranger or danger situation. This isn't someone breaking into a house. This is someone who was supposed to be taking care of vulnerable people. Someone these women trusted completely. And he used that trust to kill them in their sleep. So the villain we are talking about today is Colin Norris. He was a nurse working in Leeds, England in 2002. Originally, he is actually from Glasgow, Scotland. This guy trained as a nurse after working as a travel agent for a few years, which, just so you know, is not something that is unusual. Plenty of people, change direction in life. There is nothing suspicious about that on its own. But here is what was suspicious. From pretty much the moment Norris started working as a nurse, people around him quickly realized he was aggressive, arrogant, constantly clashing with superiors and colleagues. He basically had a short fuse and a massive ego. Kind of a narcissist, if you ask. And I'm not making that up because his friends described him as someone who loved being the center of attention and was heavily into amateur dramatics. And who does that better than a narcissist? Norris also made it very clear that he did not like elderly patients. He said he didn't want to work with that type of person. He wanted to work in the emergency department because it was more exciting. I guess he loves the thrill. He made it clear to his colleagues by saying he wasn't, and this is a quote, put on this earth to sit in an office. So already not the most compassionate person you've ever heard of, but not a criminal either. Well, not yet. Now, before I tell you what he did, I need to tell you how he actually got the idea before doing the deed. Because this detail is actually very, very important. At university, Norris had a personal tutor he famously couldn't stand. He described her as someone who had no personality. But she gave him a specific lecture about a Scottish nurse named Jessie McTavish. So here is the interesting thing. McTavish had been convicted in 1994 of murdering elderly patients by injecting them with insulin. However, her condition was overturned on appeal. She walked free with it. She even continued her nursing career afterwards. I guess the rules back then, or simply just the forensics, wasn't all that. And the reason insulin was considered the perfect murder weapon is that it leaves the blood extremely quickly. And by the time anyone gets suspicious, the evidence is basically gone. Now, getting back on the topic, Norris was actually assigned to review McTavish's conduct as part of this lecture. So, his own university tutor, the woman he apparently hated, accidentally taught him how to get away with murder. Just so you know, Norris's tutor gave him that lecture on the 11th of January 2021. He then committed his first atrocity in May 2022. A little over a year. He was probably trying to let those lessons marinate and sink in before he started his rampage. Here is the absurd part, and you might want to brace yourself for this. Before Norris tried his, dangerous act on his patient, he went on and tried it on his cat. His cat was named Casper. His former partner reported him to the police after finding out Norris had injected Casper with a lethal dose of insulin. Norris told police the cat had died from hitting its head on a wall, which, even if you believe that, why would you? I'm not really a cat person, but that is just cruel to do. And nothing came out of the report, so they probably just believed the claim, I guess. Unfortunately though, this devious act somewhat emboldens Norris to move on to his actual targets. So his victims were all elderly women, and they all admitted to his words for broken hips. So not something that is life-threatening or an emergency case, just frail older women who needed some rest and care before going home. Their names were Doris Ludlum, who is 80 years old, Bridget Bork, 88 years old, Hiram Crooks, 79 years old, and just a little hard on here, she actually died on her birthday without even getting to open her cards or her presents. Yep, very sad stuff. Another of his victims is Ethel Hall, 86 years old, and we're gonna get into Ethel Hall in a very specific way soon. Now, none of these victims was diabetic, so none of them had any medical reason to be anywhere near insulin, and all of them died during Norris's night shifts. Here is the detail that caught him out, and honestly, it is just unhinged. So, one evening, hours before Ethel Hall fell ill, Norris woke up to a colleague and said, and I am quoting this directly, "I predict 5:15 a.m. as being the time Ethel Hall will become unwell. I have a feeling about her." He said that she was going off tonight and that it was a jinx on the hospital. This is just hilarious but very disturbing at the same time. And as there were no medical indication whatsoever that suggested Hall was about to deteriorate, she was on the ward for a fractured hip. She was not in an extreme condition. At 5 a.m., Ethel Hall collapsed into a hypoglycemic coma. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but I hope I did. And when nurses rushed into Hall's bedside, Norris tapped on his watch and looked at his colleague and said, "I told you." He then complained about him having to, fill out paperwork for her death. Well, the psychic indeed. Can't even imagine. The level of audacity is just outrageous. It's just like one of those serial killers or one of those killers in general that kill and then ended up thinking they are the victim of their own deeds. What the fuck, bro? Fortunately, and I say fortunately because this is the thing that actually caught him, there happened to be a diabetes specialist doctor on Hall's case who got very suspicious and ordered a blood test. And what the blood test revealed is wild. So get ready for it. There was 1,000 units of insulin in Ethel Hall's blood. And this is about 12 times the normal level. And again, this is manufactured insulin, not the kind your body produces naturally. And this maniac injected it directly into her abdomen. No doctor had prescribed this shit. Surely there was no medical reasons for it to be there. Anyways, police were called, and when they start looking into it, they found that insulin had gone missing from the hospital fridge. The last person to access the fridge before Ethel Hall collapsed was, Norris. And it was like half an hour before she fell into a coma. So police started looking back through the records, and as they were doing that, they reviewed 72 deaths that occurred on Norris's wards. They also identified 18 of those deaths that needed closer examination, and they found a pattern that is impossible to ignore. Every single hypoglycemic attack, every single one of them, happened when Norris was on duty, and when he transferred to a second hospital, the attacks followed him there too. He was the only staff member who had worked on both wards, and he was the only one who could not be eliminated as a suspect. You see, the juicy part is, he was also the only nurse on duty within 2 hours of every single patient falling catastrophically ill. One colleague later testified that after a victim fell into a coma, Norris watched in what she described as detached amusement. She said everything he did that night had to be prompted. He showed no urgency, no concern. He just watched. I tend to think it was a lie when I heard that serial killers enjoy watching their victims even after death, especially while suffering. I guess that confirms it now. Absolutely sickening. Now, when the police interviewed Norris, and this is where his ego truly becomes his worst enemy, he was aggressive, arrogant, challenging. He had to be physically restrained at points during interview, and crucially, he didn't really deny the murders. Instead, he kept insisting that they couldn't be proved. He demanded police tell him exactly how he did it. He said they are facts, weren't good enough. This is literally what it said. A criminologist later said it was particularly unusual that he didn't behave like someone trying to defend himself, but like someone trying to prove he was smarter than the police. Now you see where the arrogance truly comes in. He is very narcissistic. And then in 2004, while still under investigation, he walked into the offices of a local newspaper and told reporters the police had nothing on him. Which, again, the ego on this man is unfathomable. I gotta say real quick, you see, a lot of serial killers don't necessarily kill because they need or want to kill. They just kill because they like breaking the rules to prove they are smarter than the system. And particularly, it is one of those ones who are psychopathic and narcissistic. Not saying that is a real evidence to back that up, but that is literally what I have noticed on almost every serial killer case I have ever covered in the past. Anyways, it went into trial in 2007 at Newcastle Crown Court, and the judge spent 5 days reading how a 571-page summon had. The jury deliberated for 5 more days and came back with an 11-1 majority verdict. It was found guilty on 4 counts of murder, guilty on 1 count of attempted murder. And to emphasize on his narcissism again, throughout the trial, Norris had been so aggressive and he banged on the windows of the judge's area and physically shoved 2 members of the press against the wall as he was, leaving the court. Photos of that weren't shown on television so that they wouldn't influence the jury. At sentencing, the judge told him, "You are, I have absolutely no doubt, a thoroughly evil and dangerous man. You are an arrogant and manipulative man with a real dislike for elderly patients. My view is you do not like them because they required too much nursing and were demanding of your time. You are, in my judgment, essentially lazy." It is very interesting and somewhat accurate how the judge managed to put it together, and also outrageous. So he killed his patients because he was too lazy to care for them. Might as well just refuse to work on them or perhaps quit the job. And this is precisely why I will go as far as to simply assume, as far as I know about this case, that he is a psycho who learned how to kill in a lesson and then practiced for a year and started putting his lessons to work. Like, there is no other way you can think about this, but again, that is just my opinion. So his goofy ass was sentenced to life imprisonment, 30 years minimum. Now, here is the thing. This case has some sort of twist to it. Norris has always maintained his innocence, and over the years, genuinely, some experts have raised doubts. A leading insulin poisoning expert reviewed the case and said he believed the conviction was unsafe. A BBC documentary was made questioning the evidence. 2 jurors from the original trial later said they now believed he was innocent, which is strange, isn't it? The Criminal Cases Review Commission actually referred the case back to the Court of Appeal in 2021, saying there was a real possibility that the conviction was unsafe, like it was BS. And Norris, who has since changed his name to Colin Campbell, by the way, had a full 14-day appeal hearing in 2025. The Court of Appeal said that they had, and I am quoting directly, no doubt about the safety of his convictions. His appeal was dismissed. Bad week for him, dear boy. And the very last thing I want to touch on is something that I think gets lost in all the legal back and forth. Irene Crooks died on her 79th birthday. She never opened her cards. Dorrit Ludlam had fostered children for charity and worked as a nursery school teacher. Ethel Olsen's son said after the verdict, he has got the knowledge to kill people and do it discreetly. This makes him a danger to society. We hope Colin never leaves prison and can never harm anyone else again. They came in with a broken hips. They should have gone home, and instead they all got bombarded with insulin. Anyways, I gotta stop yapping about this, and this is pretty much it. RIP to all the lost souls.